How do you explain then Nicolas Maduro's reaction? I mean, he's clearly in denial about the exodus from his country. All these neighbours of Venezuela's are taking in lots of migrants, and he says, well, just come home, there's no problem.
Well, yes, they're in denial about a lot of things. They're in denial that there's a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, although the evidence that there is overwhelming. So this isn't entirely surprising. I mean, the president of the Constituent Assembly, which is a pro-government body, has just said the whole thing, this migrants leaving the country is staged. It's a sort of Hollywood production, and that the people clearly are actors. You know, they're not real migrants. So we have an extraordinary parallel universe in which apparently the things that everybody can see are happening are not happening at all.
Now, we've been reporting a lot on the situation on the border with Brazil, because we have seen violence on the border and security's been stepped up there. So Brazil taking in some Venezuelan migrants, but other countries in the region too. Who would you say is bearing the brunt, if I can put it that way, of this exodus?
Oh, well, far more have gone to Colombia than to Brazil. The outflow to Brazil is relatively small because it's through a very remote corner of the Amazon. So, you know, there are thousands of people gone to Brazil, but it's nothing to compare with Colombia, where there's about 1 million who have left in the last year or so. And Colombia is just given status of residence to a spot of 500,000 Venezuelans who've arrived there. So they have done a very great deal. I mean, they're now the new president of Colombia, Ivan Duque, is now calling for a regional response to this crisis because, of course, Colombia's not a particularly rich country. It has its own problems, and having so many desperate people arriving is a big problem for them. So he's now calling for coordination of policies towards this outflow of Venezuelans at the level of the Organization of American States, and the number of countries are having a meeting in the first week of September next week in Ecuador to discuss how they can coordinate their policies. Because at the moment, all the rules are different and they keep on changing. So it'd obviously be a big help if people knew what to expect when they go to the neighboring countries.
And Ivan Duque has said that he wants to take his country out of the regional bloc UNASUR because of silence on Venezuela. Why is it then that this bloc has been silent and that there's been no real condemnation of what's happening in Venezuela?
Well, UNASUR was one of the brainwaves of Hugo Chavez, the former Venezuelan, or the late Venezuelan president, and it's been a sort of a cheerleader for the Venezuelan government, particularly Bolivia and Nicaragua, and until recently Ecuador. But there's been a change of government in Ecuador as well, and they're very critical of Venezuela. But it's an organisation that virtually doesn't exist anymore. And this threat by Colombia to leave is symptomatic of that.
And how would you describe day-to-day life of Venezuelans? We obviously often talk about the fact that there's very little food, medicine, hyperinflation. What's it really like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, one can see that there are scarcities of everything, and nothing is really working anymore. The transport system has collapsed. Vehicles are broken down. They can't get parts. They can't get fuel. People find it very hard to get food, medicines. There's a great shortage of medicines. The hospitals can't function properly because the equipment is broken. They can't get essential supplies. It's an extremely hard life, and the most pressing thing, I suppose, for people in Caracas, particularly in the capital, which is a large city, is they can't do transport. I mean, they're having to use sort of flatbed trucks, which people pile onto instead of buses, because all the buses are off the road. The metro has just the underground, which was a very glamorous sort of construction. It stopped functioning recently because the electricity supply went. There are blackouts all over the place. In Maracaibo, for instance, which is on the lake, is the big oil center. It suffers from blackouts all the time. And this is in a country with enormous hydroelectric projects and, of course, one of the biggest oil reserves in the world.
All right. Thank you very much indeed.